Hello and welcome. My name is Aaron and this is the Thrive Alive podcast, where I'm going to be sitting down and chatting with some pretty special people that have inspired me along my health journey. I hope these discussions can inform and inspire you along your journey, so please listen with an open heart and an open mind and enjoy the show. Thanks for tuning in. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive Alive podcast. We're recording live from Fern Gully. If you can see the background in the cameras here, if you're watching on YouTube, we are in Glen Rock near Newcastle, some beautiful bush creek lands. I'm sitting today with one of my mentors. His name is Gene Kelly. I met Gene through the breathless training, just like a few of the other guests on here today, but every breathwork instructor that I've had on, he has a different approach to what they're doing and something a little different that they're sharing and offering to the world. Gene was or is a personal trainer. I think he was a personal trainer. I think he's moved on from that now. He's a purple belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's also a facilitator for breathwork and meditation and holding space and ceremony. Also doing stuff like firewalks, crazy firewalks, which I've had the pleasure of experiencing myself. And for those that know my story and my trauma with fire, I was really reluctant to go through that, but Gene held the space and held the way and gave me the courage to do it. So Gene, we've just finished your breath and ice this morning. How are you going to this morning?
Doing good, man. Really excited to be here. It was really nice going on this hike with you into Fern Gully. Glen Rock here is my favourite place probably in the entire world. I've done a lot of meditation in here and a lot of time in solitude here, and it's always so nice. Every time I come back I feel like I should have come back way sooner. But yeah, it was nice to do the Breath and Ice crew again. I haven't done the community event like that for about 9 months, but to see like over 40 people show up and see that the spirit of the community is still well and truly alive, that was really great. Warmed my heart. Great to see everyone, and yeah, I'm excited to show you my favourite place and just jam with you and see what happens.
Yeah, it was really cool. Like you said, you've taken a bit of a back step from doing those events as of recent, the past 9 months, and to see everyone rock up again has been so beautiful. But also, like you were saying, it's breathwork and the ice bars, especially on the beaches along the coast, have just really blown up. And you know, a couple of years ago, you were one of the pioneers that were holding that down, and to see you grow from, you know, a handful of people to, in only just over a month's time, having 80 people rock up at the beach, it just shows how incredible it is for people to want to change, to have new experiences and make that connection to the community. And man, I just hats off to you for holding it down, man, up here.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think that's the power of social media. There were some people that somehow, I guess through my social media, saw that I was hosting this offering, and they came along and took some photos and put in some tags, and it just grew organically. So I never intended to start a community. I just wanted to practice facilitating the breath and the ice. But I think that's what kind of helped it. Like, you can't force that type of thing. It's funny because previous to that, you know, I was a personal trainer and running a personal training business and doing my best to build a community, like a Facebook community specifically. I spent like a year just trying to get people in this group so I could offer whatever I've got to offer. Then basically gave up on that and started Breath and Ice in person. And now the Facebook group's like 1,500 people or something. Yeah. Like, all organic. It's pretty wild. My point being that you can't force these things, you know. It just was a beautiful organic thing. So
yeah, I love it. Well, I like to start the podcast off with this question, and that question is, what's keeping you thriving, and what is thriving in your life today?
What's thriving? I would say the desire to discover more of myself. You know, things are always changing. Life has its ups and downs, and, you know, kind of being a leader in the breathwork space and the ice space and doing all the cool stuff in a leadership position I've done, you know, in the last 12 to 18 to 24 months, you know, positioning myself as a leader and doing my best to embody that. You sometimes forget that there's still levels to the game. You haven't arrived yet. There's still more and more to learn. So, you know, we all kind of continue to have our ups and our downs, and I guess I'm just curious about what more there is for me to learn, what I can learn about some of the changes that are happening in my life and what wisdom I can eventually bestow, or rather share with other people. Bestow? You notice how I try to cover up that slip?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep an open mind and an open heart and see what more there is for me to learn and eventually turn into medicine for others. I think the best is yet to come. So just continuing to go with the flow and learn.
Yeah, nice. It reminds me, what you just said there is, it's literally the yin and the yang. We're all going to have the ups and downs, and that's just the flow and the nature of life in its wholeness, right? And, learning how to deal with those downer moments, those moments that are more hard, more stressful, putting more pressure on our lives and the way we want to live and the way we want to grow up, maybe our families, or chase after our dreams, and not getting stuck in the storm that happens around us, finding the center, finding the groundedness, being able to bring yourself back to a harmonious state when the world around you is turning to shit. And sometimes we're all going to fall off the bandwagon, right? We're all going to fall off. And that's just a part of the growing lesson. It's like, can you catch yourself quicker the next time? It's not about being perfect. It's not about being the ultimate, whatever it is, said thing. It's just about being better so you don't become bitter, I guess. So, Gene, let's back it up to your personal training days. Like before then, what led you to being a personal trainer? Like, what was childhood like? Were you always an active kid? What drove you to want to chase that as a career?
Was I an active kid? I played soccer for a long time, but I wasn't like the fittest kid on the field. I would say I was not a super kind of chubby kid, but I wouldn't say I was particularly fit, but I guess I was active. My dream when I was a child was to be a pro wrestler. I wanted to be WWF World Champion like Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was my dream, and I pursued that dream. And part of that was, asking my parents for a weightlifting set at like 13 or 14 or whatever it was. So I started lifting weights around then, and that's when I did sort of drop a bit of weight and start to gain a little bit of muscle and that type of thing. And eventually went to Sydney to do some pro wrestling training, and that's where I spent like my late teens and early 20s doing, being a pro wrestler in like Kusula and Minto and these like places in Sydney. I did a lot of that. But as far as like high school and stuff, and what led me to personal training, I noticed that the weightlifting and getting fitter and healthier made me feel good. I knew I didn't want to just work in an office. I knew that wasn't for me. I was really not down with that. And so I decided, well, I guess I'll be a personal trainer, show them how to lift weights. That really aligned with like what I was doing to prepare for pro wrestling. So straight after high school, went to TAFE, Cert 3-4 in fitness and sport. Stayed on for another year after that and did a diploma of fitness and sport. And started my career as a PT.
And so you were doing personal training to people's doors, right? So how was that different to, say, rocking up to the gym and going through a session with someone there at the gym? Like, what were you running? Were you have all your own weights, or were you doing body weight sort of stuff?
So initially I was at a commercial gym. And what I found over my career as a personal trainer was that I started to kind of get over gym culture. It's fine. It's all good. You want to go to the gym. But for me, I started just becoming more holistic, and it became less about looking a certain way and more about feeling a certain way and taking a more holistic approach. So not just focusing on the physical, but also the mental and the emotional. As that journey went on, it eventually went to the spiritual too later in my journey, around when breathwork arrived. So we can talk about that too. But what I found was that there are lots of ways to just lose weight and gain muscle. Not all of them are healthy. Not all of them are sustainable. Not all of them work in the long term. And the goal really should be to like get healthy and stay healthy. It's like a marriage. You want to get married and stay married. That should be the goal. But what I found was that so many approaches just didn't do that. And I feel that because I was good at what I did, I had clients who stayed on long enough to see the long-term shortcomings of those approaches. But at the time, I always said, the two things that you need to succeed as a personal trainer is to know your stuff and to give a stuff. Because if your knowledge was insufficient and you weren't getting the results, well, you would care enough to take responsibility and go, what am I missing? And that was the journey. It started with just exercise. What's the best type of exercise to do? And then I, saw the limitations of that. Then it's like, okay, nutrition's a big role. How should one eat? And then it, became habits. I became really interested in habits. We are the sum total of all our habits. So I became really curious about how habits are stored in the brain and the nervous system. That's sort of what took me from the body to more the brain. And you find that people's habits are the result of what they feel, and what they feel is a result of their experiences. So then you can see how we start going down the healing path. And I just followed this thread to get right to the root of what people need to change and be healthy. A lot of people struggle to change and be healthy. They can do it for a little while, they can will themselves, but as far as changing root habitual behaviors, it's a bit of a deeper dive. So what I do now is, I still think exercise is really critical and important, and I support people to exercise efficiently and correctly in a way that doesn't lead to injuries and things like that. But that exists within what you said, like the balance of things, the balance of all things. You need to know when to go hard, but also know when to rest. If you're already under a lot of stress that is maybe not creating positive adaptations. So for example, weightlifting is a stress that creates positive adaptations. You get stronger. Lack of sleep because of a lousy lifestyle or scrolling before bed, that's also a stress, but it doesn't lead to positive adaptations unless you call insulin resistance a positive adaptation, which I don't think anyone does. Anyhow, I had to start becoming more and more holistic, and then I started to get into okay, we need to address your identity, how you see yourself and who you want to become, and how you can aim upwards and forwards and keep working towards that, with the understanding that life will throw you curveballs, with the understanding that life is yin and yang, where you're not going to be able to just take the easy road or find the easy road and that's it. The nature of life is up and down, so I had to incorporate some philosophical stuff into my teaching too, and my approach, understanding the Tao and yin yang, knowing how to navigate life's curveballs, because they're going to keep coming. And if you can only stick to, say, your diet or exercise program when things are perfectly aligned, you're left totally defenseless when something crazy happens. And if it's crazy enough, it can be very easy to fall straight back into those old habits that left you unhealthy and unhappy in the first place. So, I see a lot of people these days still doing the same old calorie deficit garbage.
Yeah.
No one's talking about, say, the health of the soil, organic foods, the chemicals that are in our food, these denatured food products that cause inflammation. You could be eating in a calorie deficit, but eating foods that totally inflame you. And all you're doing is losing weight, but not getting healthy. And it won't last, and it'll still leave you scratching your head, and you'll think you know what to do if you can just do it, so you go on another calorie deficit. Meanwhile, you're wreaking havoc on your metabolism, and then you end up like a lot of the people that I worked with who were 40 and 50, often women, often mothers who have been trying to lose weight for most of their adult lives, and they've totally shot their metabolism, their hormones are totally out of whack, and they've still got these young 20-year-old male trainers who don't have kids, who don't have a job, fresh out of high school, like what I was back in the day perhaps, saying, you just need a calorie deficit, and those kids are still just pushing the same stuff they're hearing off authorities who are a bit older and often very scientifically minded, who can present studies that calorie deficits are the way. You've got me started on calorie deficits now. Look, if you don't have craving, you don't overeat. But if you just put restrictions on how much you can eat, that doesn't do much for the cravings. Then you find yourself trying to will yourself not to eat when you're craving. And eventually, you're going to run out of willpower. You'll have a curveball thrown at you. You'll stress out and you'll default to the one thing that you can't take your mind off because you put it on a pedestal because you can't have it. You see what I mean? It doesn't sound very healthy to me. I define holistic health as living in a balance between your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So if you're taking an approach that creates more stress, you're going in the wrong direction. If your exercise program is really stressful to stick to and wearing you down, you're not getting healthier. If your diet's really restrictive and you feel less free, not more free, you're not getting healthier, right? So what we really need to do is, I think, align with nature. If you understand that your body is an organism like no other, and it developed alongside the natural world, which the modern human is now divorced from, if you understand that we're like a leaf from that tree, and when you cut the leaf from the tree, it dies, you can see why this denaturing process that we all live with leads to so many terrible health conditions. We have more medical advancements than ever before, more medicines, but everyone's still so sick, not just physically, but mentally. It's crazy, man. It is crazy. Like, we should be the healthiest ever, but I think I read somewhere, who knows, I can't cite it, so whatever. But the latest generation has a drop in life expectancy. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. That's crazy.
And childbirth is the lowest rate ever as well at the moment.
Infertility issues, right?
Yeah. And then, going back to what you said with the young cowboys listening to the older sort of health nuts sort of drilling in certain things that are real science-based, that's on paper. If it's not working for you, then listen to your body. Be in tune with what's happening into your body, because that's where the true teacher is. If you've been doing the same thing over and over and over, and you have a coach that's telling you to do this a certain way, and you're not feeling better mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, then you need to get a new coach.
Yeah, straight up.
Yeah, and maybe that coach should be yourself.
Well, I mean, that's what I teach now. I can't tell you what to eat. Yeah. No one can tell you what to eat. And let's give the devil its due for a second. Does a calorie deficit lead to weight loss? Often it does. Okay? But let's say you put your stats into a calorie calculator, right? And you get a number. But now put those stats in again, but you're 10 kilos less. You get a smaller number. Yes. Why? Well, you weigh less, therefore you burn less calories. Right. So you keep dropping that number to keep losing weight. Meanwhile, you're shooting your metabolism. Yeah. The body's designed to exist in balance, right? So what happens is, if you start to gain a certain amount of weight, your body should release a hormone called leptin, which decreases your hunger. And because you're weighing more, you burn more. And that's all designed so you eat less, burn more, and you drop back into a healthy weight range. When you go under a certain weight, what happens is that your body releases a hormone called ghrelin, which stimulates your appetite, and your metabolism slows down. Okay, and that's so you don't lose too much weight, and you can make sure you stay within that healthy range. It's all about a healthy weight range. Why? Well, it's a survival mechanism. Okay, if you're living out in the wild and you're getting too big, say, you're not going to be able to outrun predators, you're not going to be able to hunt, you're not going to be able to contribute. Okay, if you're, like, say, haven't made a kill for a few days, so you're not eating, so you're losing weight, your body's going to try and survive by slowing down so you don't whittle away to nothing. So your point is, the metabolism is adaptable. And a lot of people who push the calorie stuff know this, which is why bodybuilders reverse diet. They cut their calories, destroy their metabolism, then have to build their calories back up. See, I've been down the rabbit hole, that was the next step. But eventually you find people that have been sold the calorie deficit myth for so long, and they've been on this weight gain, weight loss cycle for so long, that their hormones just totally wrecked, and this leads their weight to stagnate. So I've worked with women who are like eating less than 1,000 calories per day, often professional women, also mothers, have tried everything, totally dysregulated, their metabolism's shot. So that's one of the shortcomings, okay, that I have with the calorie deficit. It doesn't work in the long term. Might work for younger people, but we're leading them down a path that's going to cause problems later. Not a good plan. Here's the other problem with it. If you're telling someone what they should eat, they're outsourcing their own adulthood to you, because they're following something that someone else has prescribed for them, which means they don't have to think for themselves. That makes them a child.
Child archetype right there.
Exactly. So they don't make their own decisions. They outsource that because they don't know what to do. I heard a great quote the other day. The long road is the shortcut, and the shortcut is the long road. What I mean by that is, people try and find these shortcuts to getting healthy, and it leads them in a loop getting nowhere, like they're churning sand running up a sand dune. If you took the time to educate yourself and just go through that process and become empowered to understand what being healthy actually is, why these programs don't work, why so many people are still overweight and unhealthy despite the answer being a calorie deficit, you've got to dig a bit deeper. So what was I saying? They're outsourcing their adulthood. They're looking to others. And they're wondering why that doesn't work. It may have worked in the short term, but not the long term. And instead of identifying that as something that doesn't work, they go, oh, it did work. So then they get this false idea that this is the way to go because it's worked before, totally forgetting that it hasn't worked in the long term, therefore there might be something flawed about it. And the last thing that I wanted to say about that was that they're not talking about, again, quality nutrients. If you reduce your body to being a robot where you can just put less in than it puts out and you lose weight, you're forgetting about the metabolism stuff I already brought up. You're forgetting about the disempowering effect that it has on people who still don't know how to eat right for themselves. And help me out, I lost my train of thought again. What was the last one?
Well, what I was going to say...
The nutrient density, sorry. I picked it back up.
You don't have to eat as much.
Well, they're not talking about it, dude.
Yeah.
They're not talking about processed food and how denatured that is and how that stresses the body.
Yeah.
They're not talking about giving your body actual nutrients so you can stop craving. Eat the right nutrients, you're going to rebalance your hormones and not have to deal with cravings.
Exactly.
No one's talking about this. No one's talking about like the quality of the soil and pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and rodenticides that are in the food. All these humans are eating this, even healthy foods that have been sprayed with this garbage. And it's inflaming their body, it's causing leaky gut syndrome, system-wide inflammation. A calorie deficit isn't going to sort that out. And furthermore, happiness is a really important part of being healthy, right? So let's say you're on a calorie deficit and you're miserable because you're on a calorie deficit and a really strict diet. Meanwhile, you're working a job that you fucking hate.
Yep.
Should you go on another diet, or maybe you need to rethink your life choices and choose a job that you don't fucking hate, that aligns with your values, so you don't betray yourself every time you go to work.
That reminds me of a saying, Lynn. The saying, you eat what you are. I like to say, you are what you eat. That saying, I like to reverse it and say, you eat what you are. And what I mean by that is, when you're depressed, let's say for your work, you're not sitting in the right job, so you're upset about that, so you feel like shit, so then you're more inclined to go and eat like shit for self-comfort, for emotional eating, and then you're just recycling that shitty system. You might be doing all the good things, eating the right foods, and then, like you said, with the job, Macca's is just around the corner, you give into those sort of cravings, those sort of situations that it's just going to be like those little quick fixes, but in the long run, what are they actually going to be doing for your body and for your mental health?
Well, nothing good, most likely.
No.
And look, I'm all about balance, man. I love hot chippies. Okay? Delicious. Chicken salt, super, super tasty. But if that's a habit, if you're doing that for lunch every day, you're going to pay for it. We need to, by default, be aligned with nature and have foods that aren't denatured, that are whole foods, that are nutrient dense, that serve the body. And then, sure, you leave room for the yin or the yang, whatever you look at it for, to enjoy yourself. And what you find is as you become more healthy, those foods become less enjoyable. So you continue to spiral upwards and have it less and less because you crave it less and less. Let me try and hit you with a bit of a model that I came up with, because you mentioned that when you feel like crap, even though you're trying to be healthy, you tend to go to those things that give you that quick high, like lousy food or whatever it might be. This is what I had to work out as part of my coaching program. People want to be happy, but they confuse happiness with pleasure. Because what happiness and pleasure have in common are good feelings. Okay? Now, you shouldn't set happiness as a goal, though, because, as we've discussed, the nature of life is up and down. So it's inevitable that sometimes you're not going to be happy. Okay? So if your goal is to be happy and you're not happy, you're a failure. Bad approach. So what should we aim for instead of happiness? Well, meaning. Okay? Because meaning, a byproduct of having a life that's meaningful and living a life of meaning and purpose, is happiness, which gives you good feelings. But when life's bad, that meaning in your life, kids for example, or a higher purpose, that gives you something worth suffering for. When life's not so good, you've got something that you can weather the storm for. Okay? Something worth sticking around for instead of getting pessimistic or nihilistic, right? So that's where I start with my coaching programs. Like, okay, who do you want to be? What's your why? Why do you want to change? What's the best version of yourself that could exist, that does exist in the future potential? What does that look like, and how can we aim at that and tune into that? Because then embodying that becomes its own reward, okay? And it's meaningful, and that makes you feel happy, that gives you good feelings. The alternative to that is pleasure, okay? If you don't have something higher to derive your meaning and happiness and pleasure from, what you'll do is you'll start to look outside of yourself. You got to understand that feelings of pleasure, they can come from both outside and inside, exogenous and androgynous. Okay? The thing with meaning is that it comes from your own state of mind. You feel good from your own state of mind. You don't need something outside of you to feel good. But if you don't have that, you look to external sources to create that chemical reaction in the body that makes you feel good. And that's when you go towards things like the chips or the alcohol or the weed or whatever it might be. Okay? Because it gives you that little hit. The problem with that is that it has side effects, hangovers and come downs. It's not good for your health. And not only will you rely on that for your happiness and your pleasure, when life gets crappy, that's what you go to deal with it. Okay? So it becomes a way of self-medicating. So you can see how there's that split between high health and lower levels of health. Okay? The lousy habits and impulses and cravings that we use to basically numb ourselves and just feel good, as opposed to developing a vision worth striving for that we can then use to supercharge our daily habits and rituals with meaning. So I link that higher vision for yourself, for the little things you do or don't do daily, so it charges them with meaning. Because the truth is, man, habits are where it's at. It's the little things you do daily that compound, that pile up like compound interest. Okay, or the river that cuts through stone, not with power but with persistence. Okay, it's a war of attrition. Okay, you got to think long term. And the thing about that is that they're so small and insignificant that it's so easy to not do it. Oh, I've got to get out the house. I'm not going to drink that glass of water now that I've woken up. Oh, I'm going to grab a coffee. Oh, it's 10 minutes of breath work or meditation. I'm not going to do it. It's only 10 minutes. It doesn't do anything. Well, talk to me after 5 years or 10 years. You know?
Yeah.
You see people go on these journeys up and down.
What you just said there reminds me of a saying, I think I butchered it on the podcast already, of trying to explain, if you're turning your ship to a degree, do you want to, I'll let you say that one.
Yeah, so your life is like turning around a tanker ship, not a speedboat. Yeah. You got to turn your life around degree by degree, okay, progressively. And if you change a ship's orientation even by 1 degree, across time it'll end up hundreds of kilometers off course. So you cannot underestimate the impact of small things. It's why humility is a really important virtue. You need to be humble enough to say, I need to stick with this. And in fact, this is all I can handle right now. Like I said, people for like 3 months can overhaul their nutrition. They can overhaul their exercise. But it's willpower. And they're not addressing the underlying neurological structures in the brain that are responsible for their habits. You see...
It's where stress is coming to creep back in. Yeah.
That's right. Most of what we do is what's called the unconscious or the automatic part of us. It's something called the adaptive unconscious, okay, which means that as we engage in the world, we find ourselves encountering reoccurring problems. But your brain needs to be really efficient because it takes up so much energy. We use so much more energy in our brain than an animal does its brain, okay, because we've got this big neocortex. The brain is 2% of our body weight, but uses a minimum of 20% of our resources. Okay, I've heard it takes up to 80% of our resources, energetic resources. So if it needs to think about every little thing all the time, it's exhausting. Anyone with anxiety can tell you that too. So what the brain tends to do is it recognizes patterns, and it recognizes things that you've encountered again and again, and it develops the equivalent of default answers. Now when you encounter that problem, you don't have to think about it anymore. Okay, it saves energy and frees up your attention to focus on other things. So if you think about driving home from work, who's ever had the experience where you're driving home from work and you pull up in your driveway and go, oh man, I wasn't even there. There's a story that I've heard about a dementia patient who had totally lost his memory, didn't know who he was or who his family was. And the nurses come in one day and he's out of his bed. And they, oh, where is this guy? Oh my God, he's lost. Next minute he walks through the door. And this happened again and again, day after day. And what they found out was that he was going on the walk that he did every day before his memory started to fail on him. How could he do that? Well, he was programming that into his nervous system. So even though he's not conscious of that walk, he couldn't tell you the way home, he can embody that and walk around. So this is what our body and brain's doing all the time. Now, it's these little habits that we pick up that will orient you towards heaven or hell, basically. If you've developed the habit of having a 6-pack of beer every time you come home from work, every time something stresses you, have you made the habit of freaking out and kicking and screaming and really indulging that stress response? Do you think negatively about yourself and others? All that stuff, through habit, compounds and dictates your level of health in the long term. So if you're willing yourself through 3 months of weight loss, but not addressing the fundamental underlying brain structures, if you're not rewiring your brain, you're going to eventually default to those old behaviors that ended up putting you in the position where you need to lose weight and get healthy in the first place. You're not getting to the problem at its core. This is how I've become obsessed with the brain. The brain's really interesting to me. It's where everything starts and ends as far as I'm concerned. Now, it's a neurological pattern before it's a motor pattern in the body. Like the same way a thought is a thought before it becomes a behavior or embodied action, whether it's unconsciously or consciously. So as a personal trainer, as I became more holistic and went down this route, I found that, it's habits in the brain. Why do we have those habits? How do we identify ourselves? How do we see ourselves? And how can we change all that in a way that leads to new behaviors and new outcomes that last?
So you keep mentioning the word holistic, and I'm aware that you did HLC, holistic lifestyle coaching, through the Chek Academy, Paul Chek. We've spoken about him a few times on the podcast. How did you bring what you were learning from that into your PT? Because this was still going before you went to the breathwork, right? The whole HLC?
Yep.
Yeah. So how did you bring in with your clients a more holistic approach? How did you get them to break out of these habits that they may have been repeating?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that you cannot teach to anyone who doesn't want to learn. And that's one of the shortcomings I found with personal training, is because when people contact a personal trainer, they already tend, not always, but tend to have an idea of what they think they need to do.
Yeah.
I need to go through my own personal Rocky montage. I need to punch some bags and do some squats. Da da da, da da da, da 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 da. So when I say, Adrian,
I did
it. So when people call you up and are you taking another piss?
No.
Okay, sorry. You can edit that out, right? So people ring up and you try to explain a holistic approach, and some people are down for it, other people just aren't. And this is how I became quite disenchanted with personal training. I really wanted to start working with people who were open and willing to learn and willing to be empowered and learn what it takes to be truly healthy, not just lose weight. I want to empower them to have the tools to make their own decisions, guide themselves as to what kind of workout they should do on a particular day, etc. But to answer the question, for those who were willing, first thing I did was establish your why, or your dream life. The you at your highest potential. What does that look like? What kind of person do you want to be? Not what you want, not what you want to do, but like who you are. Okay? Because energy precedes matter, or a thought precedes the physical, right? And even though it takes time for the physical body to change and reflect, say, the healthier version of you, from a mental perspective, you can tune into that healthy version of yourself straight away. You can envision it, tune into that version of you, and it won't be a clear connection straight away, but you can begin to tune into that highest version of yourself and say, what would that version of me do in this situation? You're holding the burger, and it's your third burger that week, and you've got the Coke, and it's like, what would that version of me do? Maybe it doesn't never have burgers, but maybe it doesn't have that third burger and you put the burger down, right? You can begin to tune into that, but that all depends. That's all preceded by developing that vision. Then you got to reflect on your values, okay? Because you need to live in alignment with your values if you want to stay true to yourself. If you don't do that, it's like you're betraying yourself. that leads to negative emotion, then you go seeking pleasure. So you've got to live a life of purpose and meaning that's in alignment with you. And that doesn't mean what other people think it should be. If you're someone who values womanizing, for example, at least be honest about it. If you're a womanizer at heart and you feel like you've got to give it up because, it's not very, whatever, it's like, well, now you're betraying yourself. Someone asked me one time, what's the single first thing or biggest thing you could do to be healthy? And I said, live in alignment with your values. I'll give you an example. The overweight person gets told by others, that maybe the partner or the kids or the family, you need to lose weight, you're not very healthy. But honestly, they don't really care. They don't value their health. They'd rather stick to focusing on work, for example. That person who then goes to seek bettering their health but hates it is now living in contrast to their values, and that creates an internal misalignment. And it probably won't last because they're not ready to change, and they're stressing themselves out by living not in alignment. So my advice would be, do what you think's right. If you don't value your health, stop feeling guilty about it. And that letting go of that guilt will actually make you healthier paradoxically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So living in alignment with your values is really, really critical. So establishing that kind of thing, like instead of goals, it's a vision, although goals, become part of it too. And then obviously looking at nutrition, but rather than giving them a calorie deficit, giving them tips on how they can identify what works with their body. So I can't tell you what to eat, but I can give you some hints, because the human body is an organism like any other. Therefore, eating in a way that aligns with evolution and nature, that's going to be universal, that we can all apply. So the first thing I advise people when it comes to food is eat regularly, okay? Or consistently. So if you eat twice a day, be consistent, because your body's going to catch the rhythm, okay? And that's going to be consistent, and you'll be able to get your digestive rhythm aligned, okay? Rather than just surprising it all the time. When you do eat, sit down and be present with your food. Don't eat while you're working, because you're stressed out, very yang. You're activating your sympathetic branch while you're eating, okay? And what we really want is to relax and get parasympathetic to aid the digestive process. That's the first thing I would say. Hydration's the next one. Every human organism needs water. Filtered water or natural water with some Celtic sea salt for the minerals. That's really important too. That's good advice for any organism. Then I would say avoid the 4 white devils. So your white flour, your sugar, your pasteurized dairy product, and your table salt, which is not salt but sodium chloride. Chek, this is straight out of healthy lifestyle coaching. So you don't want to have table salt. You want an unprocessed rock salt. So avoid the salt. And then the last one that I said was eat as much organic produce as you can. Whole food, free range, grass-fed, organic, in a way that suits your budget. So now what you're doing is just moving away from denatured food that doesn't exist in nature, that our body hasn't evolved to handle. When you eat the 4 white devils, your blood sugar spikes, your digestive system gets compromised, cravings, all sorts of stuff, inflammation. Okay, and no one talks about this. Well, the wise people do, but it's...
I got one sitting right in front of me.
What's that?
A wise man.
Oh, stop it. Me too. I do think you're wise. I was very flattered you called me a mentor, because I really look up to you too.
Well, you actually were my mentor after the breathless training.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, look, just incorporating,
just going back to basics, right? Like eating real food that's alive, that's... if you're someone that eats meat, eat meat that literally died recently, not that's been packaged and sitting on the shelf under fluorescent lights that you don't even know what farm it came from. And if you're a person that can't afford the organic stuff, then go out to the country, go to your local places and build relationships with the people that are growing your food. It doesn't have to be hard, and it can be fun as well. You can literally make relationships with, I've got a woman up the road that I get raw goat milk from. I can't have dairy. I've done the dairy right. I've gone unpasteurized, unhomogenized, thought it was working, and then, a month in, it's like it's all catching up to me. But I find I can have the raw stuff, And it has to be raw goat, not raw cow. But anyway, I'm going off track.
Well, that's a great example of you going through your own journey and
Yeah.
finding what works for you. If you're someone who drinks coffee in the morning and then go, oh, need to go to the toilet, that might be your body rejecting the coffee. You know, some people have made that their ritual.
Yeah.
It helps the bowel movement. And
they're like, oh, this is just what happens.
this is, yeah, it's normal, you know. Yeah, I get sleepy after lunch. I'm just tired, you know. That's not normal. You know, it's not ideal. But if you start off with like kind of that, in regards to food, that baseline kind of recommendations I made, then you can start to branch out and just begin to tune into your body. Eat something and then notice how you feel. Do you get sleepy? Do you get anxious? You need to start noticing patterns and then, you know, process of elimination. You know, and it's always a moving target. This is the thing, is like once you've got it dialed in, it's not like, okay, that's it. Because, you know, you can develop food intolerances for whatever reason. You know, women on their cycle would have an impact as well. So you've got to be flexible. That's the other thing. If your plan isn't flexible, it's going to lead to problems. You know, because like you've got to exercise twice a day and follow this many calories. It's not rigid. And that which can't bend is liable to break. So you've got to have the flexibility to understand that it's a moving target. You don't have to be perfect, but if you just pay attention, you're going to go through this process of basically becoming an adult and knowing what works for you. And then you get to stop listening to like 25-year-old kids that are straight out of, you know, PT school telling you to calorie deficit. And look, you can cite a study for anything. That's why I'm at the point now where it's like, I don't need to cite any studies. I just need you to try it for yourself and commit to it and learn. Okay? Because like, literally, you can find equally strong arguments scientifically for both sides of every argument.
If you have a belief, there's something out there that coincides with your belief.
Totally, which is very comforting, because it means you don't have to do any work and challenge your own beliefs. And I've been there, you know. But long term, if you want to be empowered, you've got to keep an open mind. And the proof's in the pudding. If you start feeling better, that's critical. But to continue on with that, we talk about the importance of stress management. You know, not overdoing the exercise, but learning how to recover so you can stay consistent. Exercising in a way that doesn't create injuries or burnout, that's critical.
Not exercising late at night, so you're disrupting your sleep cycle, which again is you're going to be waking up stressed from that as well. Yep,
sleep's really important. You know, a lot of people don't like to hear this, but I think a meditation practice, if you look at the science, but even your own experience, if you commit to a meditation practice, which we can also call a breathwork practice. I call breathwork a Trojan horse for meditation. Breathwork's way sexier. It's funny, I was guiding meditation online for about 2 years, all through COVID. I went online basically every single day and guided 10 minutes of meditation. Then discovered breathwork and thought, oh, I'm just meditating by focusing on the breath and breathing slowly. And that's when people started to pay attention. You know, breathwork's very sexy, you see. But either way, a contemplative practice that involves you holding focus for as little as 3 minutes a day can produce results. But I would say, you know, 10 to 20 minutes most days, your life will change. And the reason it changes is because when you meditate and develop that focus, it's like developing the focus muscle in your brain. The part of your brain that focuses becomes developed when you meditate. And that gives you a type of meta-awareness. Now, as you're going out through your day, embodying that adaptive unconscious, your habits, instead of just unconsciously moving through that, you've got this meta-awareness where you're watching yourself do that. Then you can go, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that.
You catch yourself quicker.
You catch yourself, and then you start to pick out the little things that you're doing that are unique to you, that are leading you down a certain path. You know, again, like, I don't know what people are doing, what habits they've got that leads them to poor health, because there are many ways to poor health. Okay, it's not just a laundry list. You know, of course, there's often nutrition. The foundation principles need to make sure that you're dealing with stress, your breathing's appropriate, your nutrition, your hydration, your movement, and your sleep. All that is appropriate for any organism. They need to be in balance. But what else are you doing as part of your adaptive unconscious in your lifestyle that you don't realize you're doing, that we need to address if you really want to change and get healthy in a way that lasts? All that needs to be addressed. So meditation, I see, is not just a way of managing stress, breath work as well. It's not just a way of managing that stress. You develop that meta-awareness that we really need so you can observe yourself, and then come to me as the coach and say, this is what I've noticed, and this is what I need to do. And I can say, great, I think that's a good plan. Or, that's great, but you got to be mindful of this. I've seen someone fall into a pit this way.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. I help people navigate it and not fall into pits.
And let them be honest with themselves. Yeah.
Totally.
What you were saying about the 6 foundational principles reminded me of when Paul talks about the wheel or the spoke, right? The spokes on the wheel. So those 6 foundational principles are the spokes on your wheel. And if one of those is broken or snapped, your wheel is buckling. It's very hard to gain momentum or get to chase your dreams or be healthy if your wheel isn't circling correctly.
That's right.
And you've spoken a little bit about breathwork, so I think that's a good segue into your breathwork story and journey. How did you discover breathwork? Obviously, you would have learned a little bit in HLC with Paul, but what was the initial moment that clicked for you and we're like, holy shit, there's something big here? Because it seems to capture people like that.
Yeah, I definitely had a pretty profound experience. So I had hit rock bottom in my life, and end of a relationship, and it really woke me up as to how unconscious and willfully ignorant I'd chosen to be. And that really made me sort of question trusting myself. I questioned my ability to trust myself, and everything that I thought had kind of torn itself down. So I went and saw a counselor, which I recommend anyone who's dealing with mental health stuff. Is one of the best things I've ever done is go and just chat to someone, even for a couple sessions. But she recommended meditation. She taught me how to meditate, and I tried meditation before and it didn't really work, but I guess I really needed it to work this time. So I took her advice and started a meditation practice and started actually feeling better. And then I read a book called Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza, and he talks about a heart coherence technique where you breathe in and out of your heart. And that took me to another level. I really started to tap into the innate love that's in us all and was able to start expressing that. And then I learned that people don't listen to what you say, but they watch what you do. And I learned that a big part of self-improvement, health or otherwise, was taking on challenges and confronting things that are hard. That's a really, really important part of it. So I thought, okay, well, how can I actually embody that instead of just say it so I can inspire others to do the same? And I thought, well, getting in a tub of ice terrifies me. I'd heard of Wim Hof, I'd seen people do it, but I'd never done it myself. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I didn't do it. And after a few weeks went by of not doing it, I was like, kind of kidding myself. But then I saw that a workshop was coming to town, Breathless, and they do breath and ice. I didn't really care for the breath, but I saw they were getting in ice. So I thought, great, this is going to be a way for me to buy a ticket and be held to account and actually do it. So I bought my ticket and then got up out of my office chair, jumped in the car, went to the servo, got ice then and there, took it home, did my first ice plunge. Okay, so it was just that commitment that made me go, okay, I've got to do this. So I didn't do my first ice plunge at the Breathless event. I did it prior to that. But yeah, it was pretty profound. I managed to drop into a place of stillness when I did it and felt supercharged when I came out, and that was great. Then I went to Breathless, and Johannes was talking about the stresses that we have and how the breath is a stress if we breathe incorrectly. And I found that very interesting because at that point, I'd realized that stress is the major problem. We need to manage stress. But incorrect breathing was putting a lot of stress on people. So I thought, oh, okay, great. That creates stress, but we can also use the breath to lower stress. So it was both ends of the spectrum. The breathing itself, if it's incorrect, can be a stress, but we can use the breath to lower stress. So I thought, oh, great, that's just what I've been doing. That's why I feel so good. And then we started doing the hyperventilation techniques. And something I hadn't mentioned until now was that along my journey, I had encountered the sacred mushroom, psilocybin. And that was really profound for me. I had a moderate dose, came here actually, Glenrock, and just had my mind opened right up. And it made me question everything I'd ever known, and I felt so much better mentally, and it just helped me gain a lot of clarity. And the chatter in my mind that it always had, the addiction to thoughts, it all just stopped. Now, it wasn't the be all and end all, but it allowed me to take up my meditation practice. Okay, I really think they worked hand in hand. And I became very passionate about the mushrooms, but I would never talk about it because it was illegal. and I was worried about looking professional and things like that. Fast forward to this breathwork event, and we're doing these breathing techniques. And I start to feel the changes happening, and all of a sudden I have like a satori moment. Suddenly everything's aligned. Everything is as it's meant to be, and I can see that now. All the problems, all the challenges I went through, it all makes perfect sense. It all brought me to this exact moment. I remember there was another young man at the same workshop. As we were doing a share at the start of the event, he expressed just how much anxiety he's got and how he's just crippled by it. But in that moment for me, I could even see for him, trust me, you're right where you need to be. Like, trust me, you're right where you need to be right now. It was profound, and it was exactly what I felt on the mushrooms. So I thought, eureka, a way to bring these altered states of consciousness to people for their health and healing in a way that's totally legal. So before I even opened my eyes, I knew that this is the path I needed to go. I took the next course that Johannes was running, which was an Oxygen Advantage course, which I highly recommend if you want a scientific basis. Then ultimately went to do level 1 of Breathless Instructor Training and the Advanced Masters Training with Johannes 2. I assisted on a bunch of instructor trainings, both the level 1 and the advanced, supported him with a bunch of events, started the Newcastle Breath Ice community, was fully committed just to like do this, and that's how I got into it. This was a way to bring these altered states to more people in a way that was legal and safe and effective. And there's a rich history behind it. Stanislav Grof was doing this for a very long time. Thousands of years before that, people were using the breath to enter these altered states. I touch on the science at a lot of my workshops about obviously psychedelics and breath work, but also near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, all that sort of stuff, meditation. And what I love most about it, man, is that what unifies all these things is the effect on the brain. They're not all perfectly the same, like you're not going to get a one-for-one crossover, but as far as its effect on the default mode network, which is basically your story, and the neocortex, and your attention centers, it's all very, very similar to these mystical experiences that change people's lives normally for the better.
Yeah.
So that's how I got here.
Yeah, what you said just there reminds me, I can't remember of what the study was called, but it was on near-death experiences, plant medicine experiences, altered states through going to church and hearing the harmonics. And then they put all these people's experiences out and didn't say where they came from, and they're all the same. All these people were describing almost the exact same experience.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it was basically their experience report. They wrote a piece about what they experienced, but then chopped the head of the snake off. They didn't say what induced that experience, whether it was church or otherwise. And they were what's the word I'm looking for? Indiscernible from each other. Yeah. They all led to the same kind of higher place. Yeah. And that's where I think you can look to the brain. Yeah. You look to the brain, and that's where you're going to see those crossovers. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about a few of the techniques, because we've had a few breathwork people on here, but we've never actually spoken about some of the techniques that you can use at home. Let's talk a little bit about, because we'll go into the superventilation, the altered state sort of stuff. Let's talk about calming the nervous system down. Like we've got coherence breathing, the 4-6-8, the box breathing, which most people are familiar with. Did you want to explain a couple and explain what's happening within the nervous system as we're doing these techniques?
Yeah, sure. So I think what I'll do is I'll just lay out the entire spectrum as I see it. So if you look at the spectrum of breathwork techniques, it can be divided into two camps, two sides. You've got slow breathing on one side and fast breathing on the other. So if you start looking at the fast side, which we'll lay out then come back to, you've got things like Wim Hof, where you're taking big deep breaths, then coming to a breath hold. But then you've got something like breakthrough breath work, which Johannes has popularized, where it's longer periods of breathing quicker. And you can go right up to holotropic breath work, where you're breathing very fast, very full for hours. Okay, that's all faster hyperventilation. That's that spectrum. But on the slow side of the spectrum, you've got, I would say, coherence breathing, so just slowing your breath down to induce a sense of calm and relaxation. Then you've got things like the Buteyko kind of stuff, where you're slowing your breath right down and exposing yourself to carbon dioxide to reset the way you breathe, which we'll get into in a second. And then right up the far end of that spectrum, you've got things like breath holds, which you can do like with free diving, or you might do hypercapnic training as well, where you're holding your breath and doing sprints or lifting weights, and you're just flooding your body with carbon dioxide through breath holds to create an adaptation. So if we go back to the middle and work our way down the slow side, it's all got to do, I think, with dealing with stress fundamentally. That's the way I see it. If you take the first step down the slow side, you've got your coherence breathing, or just any type of slower technique, I think will do it. Okay, but we do know that coherence breathing, which is 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And if you want to really supercharge that, focus on your heart space and imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart. That's the most studied technique. And what that does is creates balance in the body. So if you think of your body and all its organs as a band, they all operate on a rhythm. You've got your pulse rhythm, your heart beat, peristalsis in the gut, your brain waves. It's an orchestra. But when you're kind of stressed, it's like the band is out of tune or out of time. So it creates a racket. And that's reflected in insufficiency of the functions of the body. So your digestion's just not working well, your gas exchange for oxygen and carbon dioxide isn't working well. It's just a bit of a racket. Okay? It drops efficiency, and that results in like a lack of mental clarity, brain fog, and also negative emotion. All those are associated. So when you slow your breathing down, what you're doing is allowing everything to catch up. When your breathing slows down through a phenomena known as respiratory sinus arrhythmia, your heart slows down. Okay, because the heart's putting the blood all through the body, and it wants to be efficient. It doesn't want to back up of oxygen or otherwise. Okay, so it's trying to time its beats with your breathing so it can be efficient. But because of your heart's role in all the other systems of the body, the heart has a way to communicate with those systems. So your breathing slows down consciously, your heartbeat manipulates and changes, it slows down too, then the entire rest of your body gets a word from the heart that, hey, we're slowing down, everything's cool. That's when the timing synchronizes. And that's when efficiency improves. So there's less stress in your body, more mental clarity, better cognitive performance, and that's associated with positive emotion too. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So just by slowing it down with that heart coherence technique, you're synchronizing your bodily systems. But any type of slow breathing is going to stimulate the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system and allow you to feel more calm, more connected, and allow your body to induce its internal rejuvenation systems. So if you think about how you breathe when you're stressed, it's something like short, sharp, fast, through the mouth usually. When you're calm, how do you breathe?
Slow through the nose.
Nice and slow through the nose. But because we've got conscious control over our breath, it goes both ways. The state of our nervous system is reflected in our breath, but we can manipulate our nervous system through the breath. So if we consciously breathe slow in this way, we're calming everything down, restoring balance, synchronizing, like I said, and allowing the body's innate, natural rejuvenation functions to take hold. Straight away, your health improves. Okay, because you're not blocked up from all this stress. Okay, you can assimilate nutrients, eliminate waste. Again, connect with people, your immune function increases, you can sleep better, everything gets better.
Rest and recovery.
Rest recovery, the yin to the yang. Exactly. So I would say that kind of track follows like that. Like, again, if we start with coherence, but then we're slowing it down even more with like box breathing, where we're holding after an inhale and an exhale, in, hold, out, hold. The triangle breaths, in, out, hold, or in, hold, out, that type of thing. And then you start going down the farther end of the spectrum to carbon dioxide tolerance. Now, we've got a lot of time to talk about this, right?
Let me just check. Yeah, we've still got another 40 minutes, I think.
Cool. Well, I'll try and, I don't want to drag on, but, you know, I've got a lot to say about this stuff.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to get you on, because, yeah, the way you've beautifully laid out, down regulation breathing.
Right. So everything so far that I've spoken about, what we're talking about there is a formal practice where you sit and for, say, 10 minutes, you're consciously breathing in this way. But that may not do a whole lot for your informal practice or your baseline breathing for every other hour of the day where you're not concentrating on your breath, right? Mm-hmm. But what we really want to do is make sure we're breathing slowly by default. What happens though is that because we are stressed because of the modern world, we tend to be stimulated in the nervous system, and that leads to faster breathing. And faster breathing leads to an output, a higher output of carbon dioxide. Okay, we're breathing out too much carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide isn't a waste gas. It has a lot of functions in the body. Again, it's the yin to oxygen's yang, everything in balance. So when you fast breathe due to stress and you breathe out too much carbon dioxide, you miss out on some of its critical functions. There's a bunch of functions that I won't get into unless you want to ask me about it later, but the most relevant one that we need to talk about here is that carbon dioxide determines when you take your next breath. So if we think of the breathing cycle as you breathe in and then you breathe out. And after your breath out, carbon dioxide starts to build. And this is the feeling you have when you hold your breath. That feeling that you want to take a breath, it gets gradually more and more intense. That's the buildup of carbon dioxide. Eventually gets to the point where you take a breath. Okay, and this is happening without us even realizing. That's how the body regulates breathing without us having to think about it. Now, if you're breathing out too much carbon dioxide due to fast breathing, there is less carbon dioxide in your body. You are exposed to less carbon dioxide for those reasons. With less CO2 in the system, you become intolerant of CO2, like alcohol. Think of it like alcohol. If you're exposing yourself to alcohol, you eventually need more alcohol to get drunk. But if you don't drink at all like me, you're a lightweight and you only need one drink to get drunk. If you're not exposed to carbon dioxide, your carbon dioxide doesn't have to build up very much at all before you want to take another breath. So if you think about how that plays with the breathing cycle, in, out, builds quickly, in, out, builds quickly, in, out, it speeds up your breathing. If you're more tolerant of carbon dioxide, it takes longer for that to build up to the point where you stimulate a breath intake. Breath slows down. Making sense?
Yeah.
So when you become intolerant of CO2 due to a lack of exposure, because of your fast breathing, you reset your what's called your baroreceptors in your body, which is what measures the CO2, and it makes them really, really sensitive, and you breathe quicker by default. This means you get stuck in a stress response, digestion's compromised, all the stuff we spoke about before. All that internal rejuvenation stuff is compromised. So a formal slow breathing practice like we've already discussed can be very helpful. But as you get further down that spectrum, you want to expose yourself more to CO2. And it can be relaxing with practice, but from my experience, as you expose yourself to more CO2, it's actually more stressful because it's uncomfortable. On the plus side though, you've learned to deal with stress. So I work with some clients with how to deal with stress, and one of the ways I do that is through breath holding and just getting used to feeling that and remaining calm, because that will be reflective of what's happening when life stresses you out. Can you remain calm under that stress? But what we really want to do is not only learn how to deal with stress in real life with that practice, what we're really doing is exposing ourselves to CO2 so we can gain a tolerance, and it slows the breathing down and we restore breathing. This is Buteyko.
Yeah.
This is oxygen advantage. And then right up the other end of the spectrum, you've got like your free divers and your breath hold training, and that can be used for elite athletes. I've heard of people having pretty amazing like spiritual like experiences using like breath holds and free diving experiences. And you could think it would loop all the way to the far end of the fast breathing spectrum, which can also create those kind of experiences like we've touched on.
Yeah.
But that's how I kind of see it. It's the slow breathing formal, but then formal breathing training with the goal to slow your general breathing down, and then breath hold training for like performance and things of that nature. And then of course we've got the fast breathing side of the spectrum, which is a great way to drop into slow breathing. Like if you're someone who's anxious, sitting and trying to breathe slowly may not work for you because of your monkey mind.
Yeah.
But you do 10, 20, 30 big deep breaths, move blood out of the neocortex, then drop into slow breathing. That's a way of meeting you where your mind is at, which is really active, and then like having a rebound effect into the parasympathetic side of the nervous system.
Well, that's just like what Shavasana is at the end of yoga.
Totally.
It's like a lot of people can't just sit in meditation, so yoga was actually designed to get the body moving and move that energy so you can, at the end, then you can meditate. Which, it's funny, when I moved out of the country, because it's like a big coal mining sort of mentality, a lot of the coal miner people, they leave the room at that end of the meditation when they don't understand that their yoga was there designed for that end meditation.
Right. Well, I didn't know that,
Yeah.
but you're exactly right. You can see the principle though. It's if you're really yang, say anxious, you meet yourself there with something active and demanding on your body, and that'll drop you into yin. It's the natural balance there. So I do that a lot with the community events. You know, I do a lot of slow breathing, but I start with the fast breathing just to get people into their bodies and out of their heads. And then we do like a few rounds of that later on before the ice and that type of thing. I also do the slow breathing before I get people to communicate with each other, so that when at first they can just be with themselves and calm down, so that when they speak to other people, they're in a calm, relaxed state and they can be more open and actually connect. I know for a lot of people, including me probably back in the day, if I started with, hey, let's get to know each other first, and I hadn't down-regulated, I'd be really kind of awkward and uncomfortable talking to people straight away.
Yeah.
But that's really by design, you know.
Yeah.
Then of course you've got your Wim Hof, probably very popular with a lot of the listeners. They know the feeling they get from doing that, you know, working hard and dropping into the stillness with the breath holds. And then right up the far end of the spectrum, you've got what I do at Altered States, which was inspired by Stanislav Grof, who did the holotropic breath work, where you're breathing for a long time with music with the goal to sort of gain greater insight or clarity or connect with something or crack the heart open and have that more transcendental experience.
Yeah.
And that offers health and healing through just being able to, you know, one, release emotion, which people probably see a lot of. A lot of breathwork's about releasing the stored up trauma in the body, so they have an emotional response. But that's all set and setting. I see that happen a lot, and that's great. I think it's really necessary. At my breathwork events, it's more about blissful. So rather than trying to create a set and setting where we're creating a space for you to have a big cry, again, which is fine, at my events it's more like beautiful, fun, uplifting music so they can have their heart open and feel really good.
Yeah.
Often they come together, but set and setting like psychedelics for breathwork is critical for the experience of the participant.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that with being in certain settings and doing breath work, it's all about the setting with what people get out at the end.
Yes.
It's some people can have the sharing, have the breath work, do all the things, and they still don't feel safe to release. It's like they're still got that bit of resistance and they're not fully letting go. And yeah, like you said, the set and setting plays a massive role in that.
Totally. Like if they're not feeling safe, you know, the facilitators can only do the best they can.
Yeah.
The person, you know, still might have a lot of guards up, and you got to remember, often these are done in big group settings.
Yes.
So that's why I know a lot of practitioners are offering private sessions.
Yeah.
And that may be a more appropriate place for that person to go and release. Thankfully, there are a lot of really great instructors who are offering those types of experiences, and people can get that kind of support if they want to.
Yeah.
But I do know that it can be a pretty marvelous experience doing it in a group.
Yeah.
And I've always found it's different than doing it one-on-one, personally.
Yeah, I prefer the group. It's when you get everyone in tune, everyone's incoherent, and the breath is just moving as one big organism in the room. That it's powerful shit.
It's remarkable, man.
Yeah.
It's really, really remarkable.
Yes. Well, just before we move on from breathing, I just want to acknowledge the breath work that you've been doing through the podcast. I've been noticing you're doing the nasal breathing through your nose while you're talking, which talking can become quite stressful for someone that's been talking for a long time. You know, like I just took then a breath through my mouth, and I can already feel my heart rate going up. And it's just cool to witness and watch you and learn from you, just maintaining your breath and as you're delivering so much wisdom right now on the podcast. So yeah, I just wanted to shout you out for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's very easy talking about this stuff that hopefully you can tell I'm very passionate about. It's very easy to get excited and forget that.
Yeah.
But it was something for a very long time that I did consciously. You know, and I actually begin to notice with other presenters, like when people are talking, they go, like this type of thing, you start to notice. Whereas if you can take that breath in through your nose, it just keeps your brain, you know, with the oxygen, so you can articulate yourself better, which I, you know, strive to do. But yeah, it takes practice, but eventually it becomes default. It's like retraining your breath. Eventually, you don't have to think about it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's definitely something, especially doing the podcast, that I've noticed that I need to work on.
Yeah. But I mean, this is how you notice those things, man. Like I used to listen to myself talk or whatever, and notice things that I wanted to do a bit differently. But like we discussed on the hike here, it's that imperfect action that keeps you moving forward. You stumble forwards and upwards, which is way better than trying to get it perfect, to take one step forward that will never be perfect anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and that's advice for myself, by the way. Like I need to stumble forward a bit more in my life, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the altered states and you mentioned mushrooms. Obviously, you're doing legal mushrooms. Wink, wink. No, I'm joking.
No, it is legal. That's something I've had to make a point of saying is that we don't do anything illegal at these events. It is 100% based on my psilocybin experiences, but it was my breathwork experience that was so like a psilocybin experience that made me want to create something like this. So it's we've got some beautiful musicians. We've got 2 really fantastic musicians that we kind of stick to now, or maybe 3. We've worked with, I think, up to 5. We've tried 5 different people, all amazing, but it's been so beautiful to create something unique that's sort of mine with musicians that haven't done breathwork events before. So I've got Josh from like the Queensland way, and Sharif in Victoria, who are just absolute masters of their craft. Doing that with Allura as well, traveling all over the coast and putting on those events. And yeah, basically it's a really fun, kind of silly evening of like connection games and different breathwork techniques. And I talk about, the science of psychedelics as I understand it, and relate that to breathwork, and then relate that to, basically self-development. Our personal growth journey, which most people who attend, that's kind of what they're on. They're not people that want to trip out. They're more people that are aware that you can use this stuff for self-development and spiritual development, and are curious to learn more. And then we go on a big journey, and yeah, we've gotten amazing feedback. I've been lucky enough for it to be successful. Sold out pretty much every show we've done. And we get a lot of amazing feedback, a lot of people having their hearts opened up, lots of big smiles. We've had a few...
my dad came to one.
Yeah. I love your dad, man. He's the best. And it's great to see your sister coming to these events too.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the positive influence you've had on your whole family, in fact. That's something I've noticed. And that's what it's all about. Especially like coaching people. That's what we want to see. We want to see that you lift your ship and that lifts everyone else's. Yeah. But going back to altered states, it's about having fun. It's about going for that big, heart-opening, loving experience and feeling connected. And by and large, that's what we've been able to create. You're not going to please everyone. I've had some pretty interesting complaints. But for the most part, everyone's... Oh man, it's been amazing, the people all over the country that we've connected to and want to have us back. It's really heartwarming.
So with the mushroom ceremony, you are taking some form of mushrooms, lion's mane?
So what we do as part of Altered States is that we do have a mushroom brew. Before the breathwork, we have some mushrooms, but it's lion's mane. And lion's mane is a brain booster. So the idea is that we're going to supercharge the brain with the breathwork, with the meditation, with the music, and that'll really help you go on an experience. Cacao's a heart opener too, we know that. But before it was Altered States, I was doing something called mushroom ceremonies in my garage. So I had a PT studio at home, quite a nice big one, and I had my massive squat rack that I covered up with like sheets and beautiful tapestry and things like that, and I bought a bunch of trundle mattresses and turned it into a ceremony space. And I called it a mushroom ceremony, where if I was going to take people through a mushroom experience, it would be exactly that, except we have lion's mane and do breath work. And that's what it was. It was 10 people at a time. They come in, we have an evening of sharing, connecting, me teaching, and then I sort of get them to lie on my kitchen floor, and it's really shitty and uncomfortable, and then music starts to play somewhere downstairs, and I start to cheese it up a little bit. What's that? You guys hear that? Quick, everyone up. And we go downstairs, and I had a cupboard that I'd put against my door, and my parents are clowns. I've grown up with professional clowns as parents. It's another whole thing, but just like they do.
That explains so much.
Yeah. Did you know that? My parents are clowns, so they do kids' parties and things like that. Anyway, so I've grown up with like a house full of costumes. So I got this wardrobe off of Marketplace, knocked the back out of it, and put that against the door of my gym which is now a ceremony space. You open up the cupboard, there's all these costumes in it. It's really weird. And I built a tunnel. So you go through the cupboard. It's like Narnia.
Yeah.
So you go through the cupboard. I'm helping people through. They can't really see. Then it opens up this beautiful space. So they go from thinking that they had to lie on my kitchen floor and it was real amateur hour to this beautiful space. I've got a live musician playing for them. And they settle in and we go on this journey. You know, part of it is inducing that childlike sense of wonder and play.
Yeah.
That was a big part of what I do. I've got dreams of doing like a cabaret breathwork eventually, where maybe I play the role of like an idiot guru, where I'm the guru and I'm going to show you how to breathe, and like I've got my robe tucked into my underwear behind me, and like it's like a clown show, but it's that really playful like type of thing. That's a vision I've had for years that I want to bring to life. But yeah, the mushroom ceremony was a breathwork event, really private, with lion's mane, based on the psilocybin experience, hence mushroom ceremony. But we used breathwork, and then I did an integration program with them where I got to use a lot of my coaching expertise to guide them through it, because it was a big shift for a lot of the people.
Yeah. Those three things, breathwork, lion's mane, and psilocybin mushrooms, all promote neurogenesis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. So the formation of new brain cells, forming new habits ultimately, and making a change. And that's people who are researching psychedelics. That's precisely what they say is the best way to integrate. What you want to do is you want to change one small thing and maintain that across time. And if you can do that, it'll lead to big outcomes in the future. So it could be as small as a 10-minute meditation practice that can lead to life-changing outcomes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was discovering breathwork, doing the training, Newcastle Breath Ice, to the mushroom ceremony at my house. It's now altered states touring around.
And how on earth did you come across walking on fire?
Well, as breathwork, or rather ice exposure became more and more popular, I wanted to find a way to differentiate myself. I thought the fire and ice was a really cool concept. And, it's all about empowerment. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do fire walking? Anyway, found this gentleman, I believe in Queensland. An ad popped up saying, hey, firewalk facilitator training. Gave him a call. Awesome dude. Super, super sweet, lovely guy. Was a druid. I don't even know what that is. but like, super cool guy. I learned how to do it in Mexico. And we happened to be running, I think, some workshops or a retreat up that way. And then just did a side tour to his place and learned how to do it. And now I do it. I've done it maybe close to 10 times now. It's not a trick. There's a very real risk, but you're going to get burnt no matter what you do in life. And that's the symbolic nature of it. It's like, oftentimes fear holds us back and there's really nothing to be afraid of. Well, now fear's holding you back, and it's for damn good reason.
Yeah.
But you don't want to let fear hold you back anymore. So you walk, and maybe you're fine, maybe you get a burn. There are some techniques we can do to minimize that, but either way it's empowering because you walked across fire. Yeah. So it's super cool. It's I think it complements the ice really well. I've got the ice, the breath, the fire, and the earth with the mushrooms too. So I've kind of got all the elements there. Yeah,
like I was saying, I was terrified when you held the fire walking down at the breathless training. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go sit in the room. And some of the girls were like, no, you have to come and do this. Everyone's doing it. And I think I went like way back towards the end. I wasn't really keen. And I remember you came up, I can't remember what you said in my ear just before I walked across. And whatever you said just empowered me. And I was like, I got this, right? I was like, a few of other people have done it. And yeah, what an experience it was. Like when it was over, I was like, holy shit, like the ice bath, you got out with so much energy. Like, is there something to that? Or is it just the accomplishment, you reckon?
I think it's the accomplishment. Yeah. Like, I was thinking about this because I did it just the other weekend. And, a lot of the women at that retreat, what's the science behind it? How do you not get burned? It's probably like that stress response, the fight or flight. It's like you've got the energy from that, right? Well, look, here's the way I see it. You've heard stories of the monks putting their hand in the stone wall, defying like material reality, or the hot mercury on their tongue, right? And bending the spoons with their minds. Well, I've never seen that done in real life, so I can't validate that. And I know that the spoon bending thing was proven to be a hoax, at least for one person.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to tell you. But what I can tell you is, like I said, there's a risk of being burned no matter what you do in life. And fear will hold you back. So when you conquer that fear, when you conquer yourself, when you walk forward anyway, when your amygdala is fighting the neocortex and you're trying to override that, it's a victory. You know, you're overcoming that reptilian brain, and that same downregulation of the amygdala, the stress part of the brain, through the neocortex, that is empowering and can translate to real life. Because every time you do that, you're teaching the amygdala to calm down. I'm at this stage now where I've got the technical side of things of the firewalk pretty down to an art. I feel really confident in that. The next stage or phase for me is to probably dress it up a little bit and make it a bit more theatrical and have a bit more of a ritualistic process in the lead up to the fire.
You have like fire dancers and fire breathers.
I want to eat the fire. That's what I want to learn to do. My father can eat fire, so I'll get him to teach me, and he can run the fire across his arms and stuff. Probably not fire spitting. We'll see. Apparently that's pretty toxic.
Yes. Kerosene in the mouth.
Dude, you ever in preschool where you blow into the paint and it makes bubbles and you put the... I drank the paint one day. So I know I'm going to swallow that kerosene if I did that. So I'm probably not going to breathe fire, but I'll learn some other cool stuff. Maybe juggling fire torches could be cool. But I don't have a really solid spiel for the fire just yet, except that I've seen them with my eyes. People walk across the fire and not get burnt, and they feel great after. So that's the medicine.
You made me laugh the second time when I came out and helped out with that one where you had the thermometer on the fire and you go, oh, just as I suspected. And everyone was like, what? And you're like, hot.
And it's so funny when you can break the tension like that. You know, just on the other side of that tension, there's a thin veil that separates it from like hysterics. You know, so. I
love the playfulness that you bring to everything that you do, man. Like the events, the retreats that you've been on. And even when you're putting something serious out there, you create that inner child sort of state where it's easily digested, and someone can take something that's so scientific and you break it and make it playful, and then now someone can remember that because they've received it well enough.
Thank you. I think that's definitely something in like the spiritual self-development kind of space. So everyone takes themselves so seriously.
It's gross, eh?
Well, it is what it is, and you do definitely want to give that space the respect and degree of seriousness that it deserves. But I think like the highest level is that returning to that childlike, playful humor, and it's funny. I can now see why I was the son of a clown or two clowns. It's weird to see how much that served me, that performative aspect. Because I was a drama kid, and it's just funny how I just left that behind. I guess just as I entered high school, but now I'm up basically performing. Like I do talks and stuff, but to really captivate people, you've got to use your body and just act it out a little bit. And definitely drop in those, I don't know, I wouldn't consider myself a funny guy. I'm a silly person. At least I love to be silly, but I'm not really trying to be. I just kind of know when to take the piss out of myself, after I've said something pretty serious. Just break it back down again. But it's not something I've worked on. I think when I'm in that space, it feels like, it is flow, man. It's just that sense of being where I need to be, contributing what I need to contribute, and something higher takes over and just knows how to use me to.
You're channeling, bro.
Yeah, and I need to do more of it. That's something I've missed over the Christmas and New Year break, and putting a hold on things. Like I really getting in front of people and sharing this stuff is like medicine. It's that expression of my highest potential, which is boils down to the coaching. Ultimately, I think these experiences that I offer, they create that shift that people really need, that big something. But then I can help them integrate it through understanding healthy habits. And I think health is the foundation for being our highest self, because we are in a body, and there's nothing that you can do that you couldn't do better if you were healthier. So I really see that the foundation and something that can translate to everything. So
that's beautiful, man. Man, this has been so good.
Been
Thanks
fun,
so
huh?
much. Thanks for taking me on the hike. We nearly got washed out to sea.
I can't believe I made you do that walk with that equipment, man. Although you were moving better than me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been doing a lot of core
Oh,
stability
yeah.
stuff, like balancing on the Swiss ball with weights above my head and
Yeah.
stuff.
That explains it. I can see it shows.
Yeah, cool. Well, is there anything you want to drop with the listeners before we head off? Maybe if you want to do like a quick, even like a little breath work for someone who's listening, obviously not super ventilation.
Yeah.
Do you want to do like a quick 2-minute just...
Yeah, first of all, I'll say that just connect with me if you'd like to. You can search The Heart Shift on Facebook or Instagram. That's kind of my little brand I've got going on. But my personal one is Gene Kelly Loves You on Instagram. And just search Gene Kelly on Facebook and add me as a friend. I'd love to connect. And I want to share just a quick breathwork flow that you can do pretty much any time. You can do it in your eyes open as you're walking through Westfield. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it while you're doing the dishes. And if you can just make a habit of just putting your attention on your breath and doing this breathing technique at any point that you're available, you will retrain your nervous system and your heart to be more open. And that's going to be positive and translate to a lot of health benefits on a physical, mental, and emotional level. So all you've got to do is try your best to follow along with me. Take a gentle breath in through your nose and out through your nose. And together we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5. Gently in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out. 2, 4, 5. Stay with me. In, to your belly and out of your belly and in through your nose and breathe out through your nose and a little more. In, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax out. 2, 3, 4, 5. Gently in. 2, 3, 4, 5. Let go. 2, 3, 4, 5. And in. And out. And in. And out. And in, you know what to do.